This is the Power Producers Podcast, where we are refining and redefining the sales game.
Rule number one is you have to believe in yourself. You're the only one who doesn't think you belong in this appointment. The prospect has already validated your existence by scheduling time with you. Get it through your head you belong here, go in there, crush it, and close the deal.
A place where sales professionals can come to learn from other sales professionals and thought leaders that have mastered their craft.
The difference between a good salesperson and a best-in-class salesperson is only 2 minutes. By spending an extra 2 minutes on what you might think is a mundane task in the sales game, you separate yourselves from the pack, you grow your book of business, you close more deals, and you retain your accounts.
As well as their peers who are still striving for perfection to achieve their why.
I have a wife and 4 kids. Failure is not an option.
Real sales professionals, real stories, real results. Are you ready to feel the power?
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Power Producers Podcast, where we are refining and redefining the sales game. Today, we have got a guest from outside the industry. His name is Culin Tate, and he's the author of Host Coach. We're going to talk a little bit today about short-term real estate investment. And you insurance producers out there are probably wondering, why in the world are David and Kyle talking to a real estate guy? The fact of the matter is, we're in one of the greatest industries on the face of this earth. And as a result of that, we have the ability to earn like nobody else with residual income and everything. And our mission here is not just to help you get better at sales and producing those middle market accounts, but to give you resources and introduce you to people that can help you maximize your wealth and change your family tree, because we all have some level of liquid income that's just sitting there and we don't really always know what to do with it. And sometimes we get scared or we're nervous or we just simply don't know where to start. That's what we're going to hammer down today. So, Culin, before we get started on what you're doing with the book and everything you're doing in short-term rentals, why don't you just give us sort of your backstory and how you got to where you're at right now with Host Coach?
Absolutely. Thank you, David. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've really never had a W-2 job. I've had companies from manufacturing to software as a service. And in 2018, I had sold a company and was scratching my head. I was 48 years old thinking, all right, what's the next, I got to spin up another company. What's it going to be? And did I want to go through all that again? I had always been fascinated with real estate. I had a rental cabin at the time, just kind of in the woods, that kind of place you just get away for a weekend. And I had started renting it out on Airbnb just due to requests from friends, and was just blown away with the revenues that it was producing. And so at that moment in the summer of 2018, instead of starting another company, I decided to dive into full-time real estate investing.
Okay. So that's an interesting jump to just jump into it full time. I mean, there had to be some level of transition there, but we were talking before we started recording, and it's obvious. And it's interesting, man, because we've had other real estate investment people on here before, and every one of them has their own kind of vertical or niche that they're going after. And they're all equally as passionate about theirs is the best, no matter who you talk to.
They're all wrong.
So talk a little bit about, what attracted you to the short-term stuff, because to be completely transparent with you, I'm looking right now, right before the market turned, I was ready to start pulling the trigger, and then things got a little bit wonky with the real estate market. And specifically, we're going to procure some property in Key West, which is already exorbitantly expensive, but it got real crazy here over the course of the last year and a half. So talk a little bit about what led you to that. And I'm going to be sitting back taking notes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had owned a couple of long-term rental condo units, and I really didn't get my fire from that. They always just kind of, they didn't cash flow very strong, and it annoyed me when the guests, or I say guest, I'm hardwired here for short-term rentals. When tenants would call with issues. I'd own a commercial building. Couple $1 million commercial building for about 10 years. It cash flowed well, but it didn't really appreciate. So while I had this interest in real estate, I always had these friends, right? When I was like in high school, you have that friend that, parents had the beach house that they paid $46,000 for, and now it's it's a house at the beach, right? And I'd always thought to myself, where are those deals for our generation? Is that kind of investment opportunity available to our generation? And I had this little cabin, and we had it just for our family at first, and we were letting friends stay there, and then friends of friends wanted to stay, and we said, well, let's pop it up on Airbnb. And it just went, it's been booked every weekend since, almost every day. We run 9 properties at about 95% occupancy. So what got me excited about it, I sort of lucked into it, like we often do in real estate and things in our career. But I saw the opportunity that to grow and scale. If one property is making, at the time it started off at like, say, $4,000 a month in gross. In 2018, yes, I did just make a hard decision to go and buy some more property. Luckily, I had some financial resources. My wife was running another company, and then it got kind of interesting because I have a tech background, and this is probably good meat and potatoes part of this conversation, which is you're not guaranteed to make a fantastic return just buying any property and just putting it on Airbnb and taking some pictures with your cell phone. That's what most hosts do. And so as a tech entrepreneur, I started to dig in, right? What makes Airbnb tick? Why is one property doing better than another? And the first thing that you have to realize is that Airbnb at its core is a search engine like Google. Remember back 10, 15 years ago when everybody was starting to have a website, and there was really specific things that we could do to affect where our website would show for, a search, say, middle market insurance, right? There's things that we could do, but over time it's become a little more challenging to make a page, website rank. But in Airbnb, where you place is, or on any of the short-term rental platforms, Airbnb, VRBO, so I just kind of use them interchangeably. The most profitable properties are going to be the ones that get booked the most, and to get booked the most, you got to get shown the most. So the platforms have to make a decision. If I have 300, 500, 600 properties for a given search area, how do I decide in which order to show those? I can't show them all at once. I've got to show them in order. And we know that, kind of like Google, if you're not on the first page, people aren't seeing you. Mm-hmm. So we got into some, I can just kind of go forward with this, or just give you a second to kind of respond. But I started to dig into what made that algorithm tick, and how do we put a listing and keep a listing, at the very top of placement.
Yeah. I mean, I think the point about the pictures is huge. Like, we just bought a new house ourselves, and you go through Zillow and some of these other sites, and you're looking at stuff. And when I see pictures of a house that's taken on somebody's cell phone and it's all dark and it just looks shitty, like I'm good. So that's totally true, man. If you get, there's a lot to be said for getting professional pictures done when you're selling or renting or doing whatever. I think that goes overlooked quite a bit.
Absolutely. And that's the first mistake. We kind of talk about this 4 pillars of short-term rental success. And the first is make it pop. So have a property, put some clean paint on it, put some clean furniture in it, get out, the old furniture and the Afghans and the rugs and the dead animals and doilies, we call it, and then spend $200-300 and get a professional real estate photographer to take high def HDR photos, and when we would do that for our $500,000 house or $800,000 house, and that's just to get people in the door. When a short-term rental, your photos are the entire imaging. They don't come see it and then they're booking off of the photos and the imagery.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a huge point. I mean, people don't go tour an Airbnb before they decide whether or not they're going to rent one. The pictures are huge. I would imagine another one of your pillars is social proof through the point of reviews and making sure that you're soliciting feedback from people who have stayed at that property and had positive experiences so that you can feature that as well. I'm interested in the other things that you guys look at, though, because to me, the pictures thing is common sense, but it's like anything else, man. There's a lot of people who do what I do for a living. That doesn't mean they're all good.
Right.
In fact, I'm noted, I travel the country speaking, and one of the things that I talk about is how I got into the insurance industry. I ran grocery stores and super targets for 10 years before I got into middle market commercial in my early 30s. And the reason I got in is because the guy who ended up being my mentor told me, he said, David, the insurance industry is full of average people. They're C players. They do just enough to get by and don't do any more, because it's so easy to be average and make good money in this industry that you don't have to push yourself. You don't have to try to be the absolute best. But if you're an A player and you come into this industry, you will absolutely dominate all of the people that you're competing against, because you're going to be going on sales calls. You're going to be dialing for dollars to book appointments. You're going to be answering the phone and handling service issues and things with your book of business, while your competitors are playing golf or at the 19th hole or at happy hour with their buddies or whatever else. And certainly there comes a point in each of our careers where we graduate to the level that we can afford. We can be afforded a little bit of flexibility in our schedule. I choose to cast my lot in time with my family as opposed to other things, but I got to believe this is no different, man. You know, there's so many people that just say, got to hurry up and get this listing done, got to hurry up and get it up. And, you know, they take, like you said, pictures with their cell phone or whatever else, whereas if you step back and you just take that extra little bit of time to just make that listing absolutely perfect, the amount of efficiency I imagine you would get if you look at the number of views and how many people book as a percentage has to be much, much higher. For your edification, I've written a couple of books myself, and my first one was titled The Extra 2 Minutes. And that's the entire premises is right. If you literally just take 2 more minutes to do the job the right way, you're going to put yourself so far ahead of your competition. It's crazy, but it doesn't require a huge investment of time or money to do that. It just is a willingness to take the extra little bit.
And that's exactly what we teach, right? You know, how to go that extra mile and how to think like a business person and think like you're in the hospitality industry. So again, a lot of people will, you know, put up a listing and they don't behave, you know, in a very professional business oriented manner, right? They're not marketing. They're not responding to customers in a business. You know, they're looking at everything through kind of a personal lens. This is my house, and that customer, that guest might be annoying. So if we take a professional business approach to our listing and a hospitality approach to our listing, yeah, we're going to stand head and shoulders above. And again, back to this, you know, like your A, B, and C players in the short-term rental, you're on page one or you're not, right? You're on page one, you're being seen, or, you know, there's 280 people that aren't ever being seen. And that's why most listings, you know, range in like the 50% occupancy, and we maintain, you know, 95% occupancy as a goal. And as a result for all of our listings and all the people that I work with.
So is it as simple, you know, I don't know the back end of Airbnb in these other short-term rentals. Is it the same general philosophy that if you've got the right keywords in your listing and all of that, it will help show up? Or is there something different in the algorithm that gets you in that top part? I would imagine occupancy percent, if that's a thing. I mean, obviously that's going to push you to the top because it's a property that's more in demand, I would think. But talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So if you think from the platform's perspective, what do they care about? What are they interested in?
Well, they want their cut.
Well, you touched on the first one before, which was be a great host, be really good, and get great reviews, right? So they want satisfied guests, travelers, but they also want their cut. So if I show your listing and you can continually don't close on that lead, right? That showing, then I'm not going to show you at the top anymore. So you nailed it, David. It's occupancy. So we call it pricing for occupancy. And one of the ways that we do this, we use an online tool, a third-party pricing tool. There's several out there. The one that I use is called Price Labs. And this is really kind of cool. What it does is it connects to your listing. You set a base price, call it $200 a night. The tool then interfaces with Airbnb or VRBO, whomever, and knows specifically what the demand is like on any given day. So our search is up 200% in Orlando because there's a concert coming, or a festival coming somewhere, or a college graduation, or in our market, it's just the leaves are turning beautiful this time of year. And so searches are up 300%. The software then knows that and adjusts the price for you dynamically, automatically, so that instead of the base price being $200 a night, well, next Friday and Saturday night in the middle of November are $500 or $600 a night. So that's where you get the higher revenue. But also next Tuesday, if I'm open, if I'm unbooked next Tuesday and Wednesday night, it may discount that $200 base down to, say, $150, $149, whatever the case may be. And that's where you get the occupancy. And from that 100% occupancy, now that you've taught the algorithm, you've taught the platform that I can close that sale, I can close that viewing. And so I'm going to show you more often, because as the platform, that's how I generate my cut, my 15%.
And that's a huge point too, because I would imagine that that's one of the biggest issues for people, is trying to figure out how to price it. And if it's not getting booked, okay, now what do you do? It's like when you're selling a house. I mean, we just went through this. It's like you list it at a certain price, and then you have some traffic but no offers, and you're like, well, what the hell? And you drop it down a little bit, and you have to play that game. That's really nice to have the analytics behind that and have it really kind of, update it dynamically, as you said.
And so what most people do with that $200 rate is they set it and forget it, right? And so now they've underpriced, that weekend where the colors are beautiful, or the festival's coming, or they could have got $500, $600 a night, and they've overpriced the Tuesday, Wednesday of next week. And so they go unbooked, and then they end up with, at a 50% occupancy rate, and they fall down the listings, and then they get frustrated and they get out of the business.
So I think too, and I imagine this is baked into each individual site. But one thing that I was kind of impressed with, and this speaks to what we were just talking about. We did an Airbnb or a VRBO. I'm like you. I'm just going to use them interchangeably because I don't want to have to remember the names of all of them. And I don't even know the names of all of them. Airbnb seems to be the one, right? But we had booked a trip, and we booked a trip for 5 days instead of 7. I mean, but 5 was acceptable with the listing, but that left a gap for that unit owner. And so, about a week to a week and a half before our trip was coming up, they put us into a drip email campaign, letting us know that if we wanted to extend our stay, we could add, I don't remember if it was on the front or the back, but a day or two. And it was at a discounted price. It made the offer very attractive for us. I mean, our schedule didn't allow us to do it, but if we were able to your point, it was like probably half of what we paid the other time. I would have definitely been inclined to extend my stay based off of that. It just didn't work out based on our scheduling. So is that something that when you create your listing, you have to set all of that up inside the parameters? Does that have, machine learning that's going to say, look, based on other listings, we recommend you do this? So you just approve yes or no or whatever?
Yeah, you've touched on 2 really powerful strategies there. One is a manual strategy that I do employ also, which is if it's one of my larger units. So if it's like a 3 or a 4 bedroom type place, I will, in the larger units, I have a 2-night minimum. So all right, we'll start with strategy 1, which is from an automated perspective. Yes, the software, if you have what's called an orphan, let's say we have a 2-night minimum, but we've got a booking in between that 2-night minimum, right? Those two-night stays. So the software will, in the case of what we call an orphan, open that night for a 1-night booking at a predetermined price. I don't allow 1-night bookings for a 1-night individual group in larger places like 3 and 4 bedrooms. And I'll employ the strategy, David, that you recommended there or mentioned, which is I will personally reach out to them and say, yeah, should you be inclined to extend, we can offer you a very attractive rate. And it's usually somewhere like in the half. Just to keep it full. So now, you've made an extra $150. You paid your utilities for the month. You've got a really happy guest, as you said, because you were really enticed by that lower price. So you get a better review, and you've filled your calendar, and the platform gets to make their additional fees. So that's a really good strategy.
It's interesting because, I'm entrepreneurial. I'm in sales. And my goal would be to be at 100%, right? Anything less than that, to me, I haven't done my job. So I think I would probably be over neurotic about trying to make sure that I had that occupancy percent, especially since, it seems to be so heavily weighted for where your property's placed inside each one of these platforms. What are some other things that you're able to do to, I don't want to say manipulate, but to strategically get yourself seen to increase that percentage? Do you do like paid Google ads or anything external to each of these platforms, or are you pretty much just relying on the fact that at this day and age we're all trained to go to Airbnb and filter by city of where we're looking for in size or price range or whatever? I'm interested in what that looks like.
Yeah, you've touched on something there tangentially, which is what I call sole platform. So I do some things. So I have a website for my properties, and I do run some Facebook targeted ads to that website. That website then clicks through, I have each of the properties listed, but they click directly through to my Airbnb listing, right? So I'm not trying to take them off platform. I'm not trying to put them, through a direct booking. I am spending a little bit, about $300 a month usually, to get some additional views through my advertising, through my website to Airbnb. I don't recommend multiple platforms. A lot of people, this is just kind of a common misconception where people say, well, if it's free, right? Why shouldn't I'm going to get more views if I'm on 3 different platforms. And based on the logic that we've already talked about here, you're not necessarily going to get more views. You're probably going to get less views spreading your juice across 3 platforms, because you're going to be in, the 100th position on 3 platforms, because you're not making money for any of them.
Interesting.
So that's kind of a common thing where people think, well, it's free. Why wouldn't I want to be, in 3 or 4 different places? But it's sort of like spreading yourself too thin. All your reviews are spread across.
It's like
3
going
places.
to 6 different carriers and only one of them gets the policy at the end of the year.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what we're used to dealing with in our industry, right? And it goes back to, it's kind of a reverse of positioning, because it's our clients. And a lot of times your client doesn't understand in the insurance industry that they have their own marketplace reputation. Honestly, that's what you're talking about, is your property's reputation in the marketplace. Because if I'm somebody who's looking to take my family on vacation, and I go to 4 different places and I see that you have that property listed on all 4, my first thought's probably going to be, wow, this guy's having a hard time rent this place out. He's got to be everywhere in order for people to see it. And it's going to make me less inclined to want to take my family there. But if I go and I see that you're only on Airbnb and you're only in the top 3 positions, that's where I want to spend my money. If I'm going to take my family on a nice vacation, I want to make sure I'm taking my family on a nice vacation, and that we're not going to reduce, not that we're the aristocracy by any stretch, but we have certain standards that we want to live to. And I'm not going to reduce those just because I'm going and staying somewhere else. It's one of the reasons why we stay at the Ritz-Carlton when we stay at a hotel.
I think a lot of people think that Airbnb guests are all price shoppers, and they're not necessarily. My properties tend to be on the higher end, and they the higher end of the price spectrum. In the 80-90 percentile of pricing. People, particularly post-COVID, right? People want to go have a nice experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't necessarily, they're not trying to stay in the Motel 6, right? They want to go somewhere that is unique, it's different. Maybe there's a great view, maybe there's a hot tub, some hanging basket chairs. People are looking for experiences and amenities, and it's not just vacation, guys. I get a lot of, people are working from home these days and realizing they don't have to work from their home.
It's interesting.
Well, I mean, we just had Meg McKean on the podcast. That episode dropped a couple of weeks ago. And this is a lady who had a tenured career working for an insurance carrier and then went to the agency side. Now she has a consulting firm, but she calls herself a digital nomad. She literally will go stay in a short-term rental for a period of 30 days in a city that she wants to go to, and just network with insurance agents and people from across the country while she's there. But you don't know where she's going to be. She doesn't even know where she's going to be probably from 1 month to the next, which, that's really cool and kind of crazy at the same time when you think about it. Like, I don't know too many people that have the ability to just simply detach from the norm and go do something like that. Now, if I didn't have 4 children, I could see my wife and I doing something like that. But to your point, it allows people who, now that we are working from home and what COVID has taught us about how we can operate digitally and meet over Zoom and everything, people can do both, man. You can travel and work at the same time. I mean, I've seen so many friends of mine that literally they don't block themselves off as technically being on vacation, because they just go to the destination. They work the hours that they want to work. And then when they don't, they block those hours on their calendar, but it allows them to get the best of both worlds. And I think that's huge, because you're probably getting people who have the expendable income to pull those things off. And it's not, I don't know. I just know you're not going to stay at the Motel 6 on a Ritz-Carlton budget and vice versa. But, it's one of the things. We had an issue. We had an issue with the Ritz the last time we stayed there over in Orlando, and I wasn't happy about it. We went over there. It was specifically for celebrating the launch of my second book that came out on September 8th, which is coincidentally my birthday. And we went over there to celebrate those things. And my wife had called them ahead of time and said, look, this is a really big day. It's my husband's 49th birthday. His new book is launching, and I want to do something nice for him. He's always the guy doing stuff for other people, but I never get to do anything for him. So I'd like to have a bottle of champagne in the room with some balloons. And I'd like to have either a cake or some decorated cookies that are blue and gold, because those are our company colors. And I use that consistently across all of my brands. And so I didn't know anything about this, right? It was supposed to be a surprise, but her one thing was, this has to be done before we check in and get up to the room, because I want it to be a surprise for him. Well, we check in, we get up to the room, it isn't there. I don't know any different, right? At this point, I still don't know any different.
And all of a sudden, Annie's just furious.
She is livid. She is beyond angry.
You're like, what the hell, bro?
Yeah. So that was the first problem. The second one was, we went to their nice restaurant and I got Wagyu steak for dinner, but we had been out in the pool all day and I really wasn't that hungry. So I decided, you know what? I got like 3/4 of my steak and 3/4 of my sides left. I'm just going to package them up and I'll reheat them. I'll take them home. We have a cooler with us. I'll reheat them when I get home tomorrow. We get home and my leftovers weren't in the bag. They never gave me, they took it to the back to box it. So now I didn't have my dinner either. And it was a relatively expensive dinner. Now, as you can imagine, the Ritz was bending over backwards. They fell all over themselves to make this right. Okay. So when I was dealing with the general manager, my messaging to him was, listen, man, I realize this probably comes across as petty, right? These in the grand scheme of things, it's not that big of a deal to you that my champagne and cookies weren't there, but it was a huge deal to my wife. Probably not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things that my leftovers weren't in there. Certainly I'm not going to miss a meal, but it kind of compounded the issue. And the real issue here is, if you guys didn't set the bar so damn high as to what we expect, stuff like this wouldn't be on the radar, right? But we expect perfection when we go there. And quite frankly, that's what we pay for. If I didn't want the Ritz-Carlton experience, I would stay at Motel 6.
Right.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, they're the same thing. It's a place for me to sleep overnight when I'm traveling or wanting to get away. And you check in, you check out, you pay your bill, but it's the experience of when you're there and what they expect. And I have to believe, is somebody who is a student of marketing and have been for my entire life, that you have to somehow create in the average person's mind looking for a property, that Ritz-Carlton experience. They have to envision that, from whether it be from the copy that you write for your listing, to, like you said, the actual pictures, to the social proof and other people talking about, how great of an experience they had there. We look at that stuff, right? And then the other thing is, when we booked the last Airbnb we did, it's been about a year since we've done it. They had a guest book there. We read it. Like they had a guest book that you could sign and talk about. We picked it up and we looked. Part of the reason why is because we had friends who had stayed in that exact unit before, and we wanted to see if they signed the guest book. We were being nosy, but we started reading the reviews. I mean, what an easy thing to do. All you have to do is leave it there. But how many properties have that? That's probably the second Airbnb out of dozens of Airbnbs I've stayed in that actually had a guest book that
I feel like that part probably died in the digital age here, and they just try to do it online only. But I get what you're saying. It's definitely there's something to be said for being able to.
But the people who write in that book are not the same people that would take the time to go do it on the review.
Yeah, I know.
They do it when they've got like a lazy afternoon and they happen to walk by it and they're like, yeah, let me leave some comments. We've had a good time this week or whatever else.
It's interesting that you mentioned Ritz-Carlton. There's a great book. I think it's something like the Ritz-Carlton Experience. And
that's what they give you. When you complain to them, they give you a copy of the Ritz-Carlton Experience to read. Okay. And I'm a little bit of a smart aleck. When I was dealing with the general manager, I said, I apologize, but I'm afraid you gave the book you meant to give your team to me.
Yeah.
I know what the Ritz-Carlton Experience is that I expect. Thank you.
Yeah, we read and studied that and wrote basically kind of a host motto, credo, principles, in the book for people to follow to achieve that same level. We say it all the time, we're charging Ritz-Carlton prices and we need to deliver Ritz-Carlton experience.
So I've got 25,000 people a month that download this podcast. And I know there is a nice chunk of them that's got some money burning a hole in their pocket and they're looking to get invested into something. Real estate always comes up because it's one of the most stable long-term investments you can make. What's some advice that you would give to somebody who's looking to just start out, aside from read your book, which we'll get to that in a minute?
Well, we say find your where, right? So where is it that you, David, or you, Kyle, where do you go if you had a long weekend, right? Where would you take, a significant other? What's a romantic getaway? What's a family getaway? Within a couple of hours drive from every major metropolitan area, there's either lakes, rivers, woods, wineries, ski resorts. Where do people like to go?
Mm-hmm.
And, how does that fit your particular passions? Maybe you're into snowboarding. Maybe you're into wineries. Maybe you're into, hiking. Find the place within a couple hours drive from your, home base that you can be passionate about. Some people come to me and say, well, I heard this market in Denver or this market in Miami or this market, in St. Louis is hot. Don't chase the hot market. Chase your passion, chase where you would like to go and spend some time. And here's the thing, with short-term rentals, you do have to spend a little time there. You're going to get this house and you're going to want to do some renovations. You're going to want to sleep over in it a little bit. So A, you want to be passionate about it, but B, you want to be able to get to it and go do some work there and get it ready for the market.
It's a good point.
I mean, I would tell you that my approach to this has been very, very simple. Is it a place that I like, and would I like to spend time there? I mean, it's really, honestly, that's how I look at it, because to me, if I can pick up real estate and have a short-term rental, so let's just say Scottsdale, for example, it's a extremely hot real estate market, probably not the best place for me to be looking for an Airbnb right now, but I have business in Arizona. I have ownership in some companies that are domiciled in the Phoenix area. My oldest son likes that area a lot, and he and I have talked about it. But that would be a place that if I were to buy a property to use as a short-term rental, I would use it because number one, it's a place where I could stay when I'm there, which makes it convenient, but also use it for a short-term rental in the times that I'm not. And then I look at other things like, they have spring training there. So obviously that's a great time to have short-term rentals because higher end, you might even be renting to the players themselves or just super fans that are going out to watch their teams. It's just interesting. I never really felt like I needed to make it any more than where do I want to go and visit, and that's it.
And that's interesting because I would think that a lot of people don't do it that way. I would think a lot of people view it as just an investment opportunity and where can I, get a piece of property that people are going to want to go to. But if you have that personal attachment to it, I think it allows you to be a little bit more passionate about it and put more effort into it.
Yep.
Well, it's one of the main reasons why Key West is on our radar. I mean, you're not going to get anything at all cheap down there, but
I need you to do that so I can stop staying at these bullshit places for these bachelor parties, because this happened a couple of weeks ago. So I'm leaving on Thursday for another bachelor, to be the second one in like as many months to Key West. And the place that we're staying at this go round is like this tiny little duplex. There's be 8 dudes. There's 2 bedrooms and like 1 bathroom. And I'm like, bro, I didn't like look at this initially when you guys were deciding where we were going to go and everything, but I will pay the difference to be in like a sicker spot where we have our own pool. Right. There's like 3 or 4 bedrooms and bathrooms and all that. Like, I would just much rather be comfortable and have a great experience than save $500 for the weekend. I'm like, dude. So,
right.
It's,
so we're talking about these markets. Let me just kind of intervene with some value for the listeners too, which is, let's say you're out there and you're thinking about Phoenix or Scottsdale or Key West or wherever it is. How can you determine, how can you get more information about that market? So there's a tool that we use called AirDNA. All right, so you go there, it starts for free. You can plug in your market and they give you a little bit of information. Then you can subscribe to it. And it's very inexpensive. It's like, depends on the market, but let's call it like $25 a month. And it's going to give you what's the investability like, which means the ratio of house price to average rental. It's going to give you the average daily rates. It's going to give you the seasonality, the occupancy, the regulatory environment. How many listings are there? What platforms are they on? And so if the listeners are out there thinking about any of these markets and thinking, how do I take a next step to determine if that's a good market or not? How do I move this forward from just a good idea listening to a podcast? Go to AirDNA and, plunk down the $25. You can subscribe and then unsubscribe a month later. It's not a big deal. You're going to get a lot of value and a lot of data about the market that's going to be actionable to help you move forward, making a decision or not.
Yeah, I think the other thing too, and if you're somebody who has no exposure to this, and I by no means, like, I'm still an armchair quarterback for all practical purposes. I've done some level of research, but the other thing that I think people need to consider or look into is, how does licensing work in the area that you're looking to invest? Because in Key West, for example, you have to buy a property that's already got a transient license attached to it, because they're not issuing new ones, or it's such a pain to get one that you're better served getting one and it will transfer to new ownership. But the other thing is that comes with its own set of limitations. You're supposed to only rent that property 25 weeks out of the year. That's the limitation in Key West. If you don't have the transient license, the difference is that your minimum consecutive days rented is like 28 days. So you can buy a property and not have a transient license, but you have to rent that place an entire month at a time. Or you go get the transient license, but still, realistically, if they were to check up on you, you could get in trouble if you're violating the terms. They only want you renting it 25 weeks out of the year on a short-term basis. As an investor, and by the way, it doesn't matter what you're going to buy down there. It starts at $1 million. So, if I'm going to get a townhouse in Truman Annex that's $1 million, or I'm going to go get a single family home that's $3 million, I need to understand the difference in the average demographic of the renter too, because, you're going to get people that come in there on the short term for 5 days, and you'll be lucky if you don't have holes in your drywall and everything else by the time they leave, because they're all getting tanked on Duval and then coming back and you're dealing with the fallout in your property every week. Whereas if you have the long term, those things are renting out for like $20,000 to $30,000 for a month. You get a much different buyer at that point than on the short-term side. So that's also something, even though technically you could classify that month at a time is short term over a 12-month as opposed to a 12-month lease, two very different demographics of people who engage in that. Right. And then there's other places where if you have, and I mean, this is just speaking to the fact you really need to do your research if you're going to do this, but there are other places where, like even Key West, for example, there's a military base down there. There are military officers that get stationed there for 2 years that are looking to cut a deal, and they'll just sign a 2-year lease on your property if the terms and conditions are right. And all of my friends that have property in Key West said, that's like the holy grail, man. That's Willy Wonka's golden ticket. If you can get somebody to do that, it's government money. That money is wired into your account at exactly the same time every single month. You never have to worry about getting paid. You never have to worry about the condition of the property. I mean, it's crazy when you start going down these rabbit holes, how many different things you can really, research to understand, which just tells me I'm not ready to pull the trigger until I have.
I was going to say that seems overwhelming.
Right. And where you start there is go find a real estate agent that gets it, right. That, that understands what your goals are, not to, live there, but to have an investment property. But
Cullen, you have to understand, man, insurance agents are the most fickle group of people on the face of the earth, because they're the first people to bitch and moan when somebody goes online and gets a quote to buy their insurance and they cut the real estate or the insurance agent out. Why do we complain about that? Oh, because we have special knowledge and they need us to be available to service them. And we can answer questions that a computer can't. And we can make sure that we give them the proper advice for limits and deductibles and all of those other things, right? We do those things, but then guess what? Is if we want to go and buy real estate or something like that, the first thing we want to do is cut the real estate agent out of the middle because we want to save that money. We somehow forget that we complain when it's done to us, but we turn around and do the exact same thing. And that's just one example that I see over and over again, but it's a realistic one. And your advice is good advice. I would never think about going to try and purchase property, doing a for sale by owner or anything without a representation.
I couldn't imagine
who's proven themselves.
Yeah.
And not just proven themselves as a good real estate agent, but a real estate agent who specializes in short-term rental properties.
Right. So, because the regulation can happen at a state level, a county level, a municipality level, or even at an HOA level. So I was just helping a client and he sent me a place. And he said, what about this? And I said, I know that neighborhood, and I know that neighborhood has regulations against short-term rentals. So, it could be anywhere. It doesn't have to be Key West, any town. It could go down to the neighborhood level where, there was restrictions on the short-term rental. So yeah, find an agent that can check out those things for you. And that's their job. They're happy to go do that. Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's how they get paid. And look, you'd be a fool to self-represent in court. You'd be a fool to do your own taxes. We go get a CPA for that. Don't stop using professionals outside of those two, because I know I learned a long time ago, there's plenty of smarter people on the face of this planet than me. Number one. And number two, when it comes down to, areas of expertise, I want an expert. I don't want somebody who dabbles. I don't want that person, that you meet on your kid's little league team who hands you a card and says, yeah, I do a little real estate on the side. No, that's not who I want. I want the person that's placed thousands of short-term rental policies over the course of their 10-year career or whatever. And they're going to know absolutely the best, because while I may pay more for them, I'm ultimately going to make more because of that.
Right. And they may know, you said the 28 days.
And it's easier. Like, you don't have to, having just gone through this process with buying and selling a home, this is the third one. This is our third home. I would never, it just such a massive headache of going back and forth and just all the other little things that I don't know about, don't have time to learn about, or don't want to learn about. It's just, it is crazy. You're 100% right. I think this industry does do that on various things. That's definitely one of them.
So, host coach, talk about the book for a second. What led you to write the book?
Let's see. So, we had this information, and what happened was friends were kind of coming to me, noticing what was going on. And so I helped a couple of friends get into the business, kind of showed that my processes and systems were repeatable in different markets. And I got kind of excited about that and trying to figure out how I would share that, that information, and started doing a little speaking basically for real estate agent offices. And the first one was a Keller Williams office down in Williamsburg. And they said, yeah, we got a bunch of investors down here. A lot of us have short-term rentals. Come down here and teach us. And that made me organize all my thoughts into kind of a nice, 90-minute outline for a presentation, which then just became the outline for the book. And we just put our heads down and, included in the book. There's a lot of books about Airbnb. You can go to Amazon, you can find 50 plus books. What I'll tell you is they're all book reports. Here's the features of the website. Our book is our real life stories and processes. We call it a blueprint. It is step by step what we do to find property, the things that we, down to like, how do you find a housekeeper, that kind of stuff, right? The tips and tricks that we do, to scale our business, it's all in there. And we wrote it, like anybody who's written a book, you don't make millions of dollars selling books. You help people, and it gives you a good platform to help more people. So everything is in the book that you would need to know to get started. And then, you can reach out to us directly if you need some more personalized advice.
Well, listen, people, as we do literally every single time we have an author that has written a book come on the podcast, we are going to give away 10 copies of Host Coach to the first 10 people who email me. As always, special instructions. Send it to david@killingcommercial.com, david@killingcommercial.com. And in the subject line, not the body
subject
of the email,
line, people.
Come on, people. Subject line, so that I can sort by subject. Write Host Coach, and I will get copies of that book out to you as quick as I get your request. So I hope everybody has the opportunity to read that. I know that I will, as I'm actively in this process right now. So look forward to seeing any tips and tricks that maybe I haven't thought of or we haven't discussed on the podcast. But anything that we haven't talked about you wanted to bring up or mention before we wrap this thing up?
No, that's most of it, and just the last part is just keep an eye on your reviews, keep an eye on your guests. Your guests will tell you. The neat thing about short-term rentals is we're making this property perfect every 3 days, every 2.3 days, right? So unlike when I had long-term rentals, you go in at the end of, a year and, the place is in, bad condition or not great condition, and you do it with a short-term rental every 2.5 days, we are just making it perfect. So you're really improving the process, so we're always keep a little list. We go through our reviews. The guests say, the pans weren't good or the lighting wasn't good. So we just keep a little list, and we're just always making those improvements, which I think really forces appreciation in the property as well.
Yeah, I don't know what your strategy is or what it looks like, but I could imagine that if somebody, let's just say the pots and pans, for example, somebody complained about that, and you go and see that, in fact, they probably are a little bit more worn than what you would like them to be to give somebody the experience you want them to have. I could imagine that you can gain a lot of credibility in how you respond to that stuff too. Like, I'm not the type of person who has a problem with, I have a problem with a bad review. Okay. But I also feel like you can actually get more power out of how you respond to a bad review than you having 100% perfect reviews, because people aren't going to believe that, but they are going to believe it if somebody says, listen, I stayed at this place, the pots and the pans, they weren't where they needed to be. We couldn't cook our meals. As a result, we ended up having to go out to eat more than we wanted to. And it's kind of put a damper. I could just see how this scenario unfolds, but I also could see that from my perspective, I would probably reach back out to that person and say, look, I wanted to let you know, we took your, we heard your review. We've taken corrective action. We actually got new pots and pans for the unit. Wanted to send you a picture of what they look like. But in addition, check your email, because I've just sent you a code that you can save X% off of your next rental on this property, so that you can come back and experience it the way that we would want you to. It's going to be very rare that somebody comes and it's had such a horrible experience that the entire trip was just completely ruined. Right.
People want to be heard. And there's private feedback and public feedback. So, during the stay, the guest can send you a message. We always send a message 24 hours after their check-in and say, how's everything going? Give us an opportunity to let us know if anything's not perfect. And then, so they can message you during the stay. And when they give a review, they can leave a public review, but they can also leave you private comments. And you would be surprised how gracious most people are. And they'll say, hey, look, we didn't put this in the public review, but yeah, the pots and pans really should get updated. And we're like, awesome, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want that feedback. Like, if somebody, I would rather somebody tell me than tell 10 of their friends.
Yeah.
And
and you're the one that's going to do something about it, not their friends.
And the other thing is, the sharing economy. Think about like Uber, right? When Uber first came out, people were like, that's not safe. I'm going to ride with just somebody. I've never had an unkindly Uber driver, right? Because they're being reviewed by us, right? And we're being reviewed by them. Same kind of thing on the sharing platforms, right? People tend to be on good behavior because they know that they're going to get reviewed and it's going to be public. And, I know a lot of people like, you don't want to screw up your Uber, review, you're not going to get picked up. You don't really want to screw up, particularly like younger people who spend a lot more time in Airbnbs. Really, that's an important piece of kind of like social credit, right? That they maintain a good standing. So, you get that opportunity in the sharing economy to have people kind of performing on their, their best behaviors, both as hosts and guests.
Good stuff, man.
I think too, to your point, that the reviews go both ways. So you also have to worry about your reputation as a renter as well. If you're known as the guy that's just going to bring some of his buddies over and blow it out over a weekend, and you leave the place in shambles, that's only going to happen once or twice before you're pretty much not going to be able to rent on that platform anymore.
Yep.
True.
All right, good deal. Well, listen, I mean, we've been going right about an hour. It's probably about time to wrap this up. I want to be sensitive to everybody's time. Again, David@killingcommercial.com and the subject line, host coach. I will get you a copy of Cullen's book. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Culin Tate. He's the author of Host Coach and a crazy amount of knowledge on short-term rentals. I would encourage you to request a copy of his book. And if you have questions, he's already opened the door. Reach out to him. What's the best way for them to get a hold of you, Cullen?
Either Instagram, if you're into social media, it's just host_coach, or my website is just hostcoach.co, and you can schedule a Calendly there to speak with us or send an email.
Awesome.
Cool.
Sounds good. People, hostcoach.co, not com. Make sure you make the distinction. Everybody, we will catch you next time. See ya.
You've been listening to the Power Producers Podcast. You can follow Killing Commercial Insurance on Facebook and YouTube. And if you want to take your game to the next level, check out our book, The Extra 2 Minutes, and our website, killingcommercial.com.